It's a development race. It never stops. It's constantly evolving. As the EW threat changes, electronic warfare, we have 24/7 support to the front line.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars we end.
Right now, all eyes are on Washington. But who's actually watching Europe at the moment?
And the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says the death toll in Gaza is now more than 60,000 people since the start of the war.
I'm Roland Oliphant.
And I'm Venetia Rainey.
And this is Battle Lines. It's Friday, the 12th of September 2025, and we've got a bit of a bumper episode for you today. We spent a day this week at the largest arms trade fair in the world, DSEI, in London.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating, and I think it's given us some really good insights into how Britain is tooling up to prepare for the future of war. We spoke to a tank commander about the new Challenger 3, which Roland got very excited about. Spoke to the managing director of the largest drone manufacturer in Ukraine about investing in the UK, and Hamish de Bretton-Gordon spoke to us about vital defensive kit. But I think first we need to address two massive developments this week, and starting with Russia's drone incursion into Poland. Roland, what do we know and why is this so important?
Overnight, on Tuesday to Wednesday, so in the very early hours of Wednesday morning, Russia launched one of its, what have become quite frequent, massive drone raids against Ukraine. But this time, several, more than a dozen, we're told 19, at least 19 Russian drones crossed the border of Ukraine into Poland, which is a major escalation. Now, this is not the absolute first time we've seen rockets or drones cross a NATO border. First of all, we have seen rockets land just across the border in Poland once or twice before. And we have seen drones down on the southern side of Ukraine, on the Danube border with Romania. We have seen drones crash into the forest just on the other side of the river in Romanian territory as well. The difference here seems to be that it was large scale, it was 19 drones, and it really, really looks like it was intentional. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, has been very clear. There's no way of saying that this was, subject to electronic warfare, or they didn't know where they were going or anything like that. It looks like the Russians very deliberately testing, well, not only Poland, but NATO's resolve. There's always been a fear about whether the day will come when Russia will test the deterrence of Article 5. Does NATO really mean what it says about collective defense? And the idea was always that no, it won't, because it's too dangerous and they know that the defense is credible. It looks to me like it was exactly that. It was a very careful testing of the hypothesis that NATO's will to act collectively to defend its eastern flank isn't quite what it was. I think the Russians are in particular looking very carefully at what Donald Trump is going to do about this. There is no underestimating how significant a moment this is. At the moment, we're at a point where Poland has activated Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which is not the Article 5 collective defense of being attacked, but it is about an imminent danger. They've called an emergency meeting of the Security Council, and there is a push from Poland, the Baltics, some of the other more hawkish allies to finally go along with a Ukrainian suggestion that's been around since the beginning of the war, which is to impose a no-fly zone on Western Poland to shoot down those jets on the grounds that we have to show that we're making some kind of serious response to this, because otherwise they're going to push further. This is all about the response, I think, now. And I think we've just seen Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman this morning, saying, I'm not talking about the Polish incident anymore. All they want to do now is sit back and watch to see what NATO does and how NATO responds. It's a real test, and it's a real critical moment for the future of the alliance, really.
And NATO did shoot down some of those drones, right? And that's the first time they've done so. Is that right?
Yes, it was Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, and Italian AWACS surveillance aircraft and NATO mid-air refueling aircraft were scrambled to shoot down the drones entering Polish airspace Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. One drone smashed into a pensioner's house in the Polish village of Wielkie Wola at 6:30 a.m. While the man was in, he survived. Moscow has denied responsibility. Donald Tusk has spoken to Donald Trump. Donald Trump put out an enigmatic tweet saying, what's with Russia attacking Poland? Here we go, ? We don't know what the American response is going to be at this stage.
And Tusk said that this is the closest Poland has been to conflict since the Second World War. Is he overblowing things a bit, or is that right?
Poland came very close to a Soviet invasion in the 1980s to crush the kind of Solidarność movement. There was another moment when they came very close to a Soviet invasion in the 50s or 60s. I apologize to historical buffs for being a bit vague about that. But there have been moments, we're talking about kind of Hungary 56, Czechoslovakia 68 kind of stuff. Poland has come close to war since the Second World War. Before this, that's reasonable hyperbole. This is definitely up there with those three incidents. The fear is not that Russian tanks are suddenly going to roll into Poland. The fear is that there's a frog being boiled here. This is a small incident that Russia is denied responsibility for, and so on. So the danger is that countries go, oh, well, maybe they were knocked off course, maybe it was unintentional, so on. And then they can push a bit further, and then next thing you know, it's been normalized. And at what point do you act? Because there's always a price of action. That is what's really being tested here. And that's why the hawks, the Polands, the Lithuanians, the Latvias are saying, no fly zone now in Ukraine. We need to show what's going on. Some people might even say, what we should do is there should be airstrikes on the drone factories in Yaluga in Tatarstan to send a message of resolve. I think if it wasn't Russia, if it wasn't a nuclear armed superpower, that's exactly the kind of thing you would see. The Houthis fire rockets at ships in the Red Sea. The West bombs their launch sites. Much more difficult to do that with Russia. But clearly, I would say, my humble analysis, this is that test of NATO resolve deliberately to see where that level of solidarity is, where that willingness to resist is, what can we get away with, things like that. I think it should be a wake-up call to those who have kind of recited like a mantra since the full-scale invasion, and before that, since the invasions of 2014, that Russia is never going to go to war with NATO. Russia will never attack NATO. And it was repeated almost as if it was just a fact of life. Like you and I might say the sky is blue, or rivers flow towards the sea, or fish breathe through their gills. Russia will never attack NATO. There is no such natural law about that. The nightmare scenario has always been that Russia will perceive that it's worth the risk just to test the resolve that is meant to underpin Article 5 and collective defense. And if they sense that there's a chance that actually NATO isn't going to follow through on that, the chance to completely discredit that and the complete redrawing of the European security space that would entail is something, it's a temptation that would be very difficult to resist, because that is Vladimir Putin's long-term goal. And this is not me reading tea leaves. That's what he says. It's what he's been saying for years. They talk about it in terms of, a new European security space, new security settlement in Europe, whatever you want to call it. That's what they mean. Do not be complacent about this.
I think that's really interesting. And some of those broader principles in terms of the sort of the testing and the shifting of international norms, I guess, apply a bit to this story, although it's very, very different context of what happened in Doha on Tuesday. So just to run through the facts, because it happened earlier this week, we saw an Israeli strike targeting senior Hamas leaders in Doha. Israeli media said the operation involved 15 Israeli fighter jets, fired 10 munitions against a single target. That target was a residential building in a residential area where lots of ambassadors live, about a stone's throw from the diplomatic district. But it's also where there was an office, one of Hamas's several offices in Doha, where officials were meeting to discuss a US ceasefire proposal that we've heard a lot about over the last few weeks. Trump has been trying to push both sides to agree to it. It was supposed to be quite surgical, targeting what Benjamin Netanyahu described as the terrorist masterminds of the Hamas-led attack on Israel on 7th of October. The two main targets were Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas's chief negotiator and the exiled Gaza leader, and Zaha Jabarin, the exiled West Bank leader. We don't have confirmation that either of those people have been killed. We haven't had any word from Khalil al-Hayya. We do know his son has been killed. We know some Qatari security officials have been killed, some Hamas bodyguards, but no one else. No word on Zaha Jabarin either.
Are the Israelis claiming he was killed, or are they keeping shtum as well at the moment?
The Israelis are keeping shtum, which is a bit unusual. Normally we have quite clear confirmation from them. They have their intelligence quite quickly about what they think has been happened, and they'll be trumpeting it. That hasn't happened. Okay. There's some pessimism about who exactly.
If they were sure they'd done it, they'd be telling us.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So there's clearly no certainty. There are some rumours, completely unconfirmed, I should say, that Khalil al-Hayya is critically injured and in hospital. We don't know about that. We're still waiting to hear. Hamas has gone underground. Apparently all of their phones are switched off. Doha was supposed to be a safe place for them. They've had their political base there since 2012, partly at the insistence of the US and certainly in collaboration with the Israelis, who have used Qatar as this very useful mediator. And Hamas has always been thought to be safe there. Qatar has also offered a sort of safe haven of sorts to the Taliban, for example, when they were exiled. So Qatar has often played this role, hosting slightly controversial actors and then being a mediator between other states. So one of the questions that we have is who knew what when? Qatar says it was told either as the bombs were dropping or just afterwards, so not given any advance notice, not given any chance to stop it. There's a big question mark about when the US knew. Initially, the comments were that they found out from their military that there were fighter jets coming across to Qatar, and then they relayed that back to the White House. It seems unlikely that the White House wouldn't be told that Israel was going to attack Qatar, where they have their biggest airbase in the region, Al Udeid. Qatar is a major US ally. Qatar just gifted Trump a gigantic plane. Clearly, they have good relations. It seems unlikely to me that the US wasn't given some kind of heads up.
They notified the Americans.
Yes.
Which is slightly different to saying we cooperated with or collaborated with or got clearance from them.
Absolutely. But notified again an hour in advance, 10 minutes in advance. We don't know any of those things. And I guess to some extent, and I know you want to talk about this in a second, it doesn't really matter because either the US weren't able to stop Israel, either because they weren't given enough time or they didn't have the political will, or they didn't want to. Either way, it's hard to see how this strike serves the US's interests in the region. It hurts a clear ally, but it does serve Israeli interests.
So this is interesting. I mean, Donald Trump has said that the attack does not advance Israel or America's goals. He feels very badly about it. He also said that he was notified that Israel was attacking Hamas in capital in Doha by the US military, but it was, and this is his words, the quotation, unfortunately too late to stop the attack. This was a decision made by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was not a decision made by me. And he called Qatar a strong ally and friend. And to me, there is a strong link between these two incidents, between Poland and Qatar. And the strong link is that this White House is not being taken seriously. It's not being taken seriously by Vladimir Putin, a traditional American adversary. It's not being taken seriously by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is it's an act of war against a US ally that hosts America's most important Middle Eastern, regional airbase, an ally that, as you say, had been hosting talks, Donald Trump's effort to bring an end to the killing in Gaza. So it's a massive up yours to Donald Trump. He was in a very difficult position. He has to choose between two regional allies. It's not something he would ever want to have to deal with. And I wonder if the common thread is, if you look at Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu, I suppose they both seem to feel that they have a special relationship with Donald Trump that allows them to act like this, that he is not going to confront them. And I wonder whether actually he's, for some reason, as far as those two are concerned, I'm not sure about other people or so on, or if it's integral to his character, but at least as far as they are concerned, a real sense of kind of an aversion to confrontation, an aversion to conflict. It feels like he doesn't want to confront Vladimir Putin in a robust manner over Ukraine, which is why he's delivered deadline after deadline. 3 deadlines he's given Vladimir Putin to stop the war. Donald Trump has said 2 weeks before that, I think we'll know in 2 weeks or so if he's going to stop the war. That deadline passed, didn't do anything. And then, this week, Russia is flying drones not only Ukraine, but into NATO airspace. And similarly with Benjamin Netanyahu, I mean, a kind of a flat rejection of Donald Trump's, of what Donald Trump wants. This Nobel Peace Prize, this attempt to end the war. There's 2 things for America's other allies to take away from this, since Britain is an American ally. One lesson is, look, it's yet another wake-up call, as if any were needed. You shouldn't need one, right? But the old certainties of the transatlantic alliance are not there anymore at all. This is an America that doesn't have that much resolve in what we would consider critical questions. But the second one is, that there is kind of an opportunity here, I suppose. Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu are demonstrating that if you could impose a fait accompli, this is a White House that hasn't really got the will to resist that. Maybe Europe, maybe NATO should be doing it, thinking about that and doing it themselves. And maybe that would be better for the broader Western alliance if they started to kind of take that lesson and begin to shape scenarios on the ground in whichever way they wish to. That's one of my key takeaways from this.
I think in terms of the Middle East as well, Gulf states will be looking at this and feeling very concerned. We reported on battlelines earlier this year about how there are growing worries that Israel is unrestrained within the region and that it's not adhering to the renewed relations that the Abraham Accords that Trump brought in under his first term was supposed to bring in. And I think we're going to see the Abraham Accords in particular come under real strain in the months to come. That's one of the sort of medium-term consequences, I think, of this Doha strike. It's hard to see how the Gulf states can continue to justify a friendly, cordial relationship with Israel, who will bomb a sovereign state, Qatar, that it's not at war with, that, yes, hosts a Hamas delegation, but that has done so, as we say, for more than a decade with the cooperation of Israel, with the cooperation of the US, and has been mediating in ceasefire talks with Israel. I mean, those Hamas officials were literally there to go over ceasefire talks. And I think that's another key takeaway from this. The ceasefire talks, I mean, they're dead in the form that they're in right now. And that's an immediate consequence. The hostages in Gaza, Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani said that Benjamin Netanyahu had effectively killed any hope of releasing the hostages still held in the Gaza Strip. And that's not just because the current hostage deal that they were discussing can't be discussed. There's no one to discuss it with. You can't even reach Hamas officials right now. They've gone completely underground. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israel is continuing with its offensive on Gaza City, where a famine has been declared. And I think in some ways, you also have to look at the timing of these sorts of strikes. We had earlier this year, Israel striking Iran, crossing another red line, striking Iran's nuclear facilities, something we thought would never happen, frankly.
Well, I don't know about never. Something
that we thought was highly unlikely because of the risk involved and because of striking another country's nuclear sites. But they did it, and they didn't just do it, they did it in the middle of major US negotiations over a new nuclear deal. And that's what we've seen happen again here, in the middle of negotiations with the US over a deal. Israel doesn't like where this deal is going. Hamas has rejected any kind of deal that doesn't see the end of the war. Israel doesn't want to end the war. They've made that quite clear. They want to go into Gaza City. They want to raise it. We've seen demolitions of buildings, high-rise buildings. They want to completely clear out Gaza City to try and eliminate Hamas. Whether that's possible by clearing out Gaza City, who knows? But so I think that hostage deal and any sense of a ceasefire in the immediate term, dead. As we've said, medium term, Abraham Accords, also over. And I think it will also increase Israel's diplomatic isolation. We've got the UN General Assembly coming up next week. Several countries, UK, France, Canada, Australia, Belgium, have said they'll recognise a Palestinian state. Some of those countries had conditions, like the UK, if a ceasefire was brought in. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So the UK will go ahead and recognise a Palestinian state. We don't know how much that will actually help, but still, it adds to Israel's diplomatic isolation, I think. We've also heard from Canada that they're evaluating their relationship with Israel in the wake of its attack on Qatar. The EU has said the same. It will add to this pressure.
You're absolutely right. To draw the parallel with what happened with the Iran talks, American delegations were meeting the Iranian delegation in Yemen. We were told getting relatively close to some kind of nuclear deal when it was, and in that case, of course, Donald Trump ended up kind of being co-opted into joining the strikes. I think there's a lesson for Qatar, which is that you can't just be a small sovereign state and in this world get away with trying to act like Switzerland and host all these enemies and stuff. You're just going to get squashed, I think. That Qatari policy of trying to make themselves the kind of the brokers, which was the brand of their foreign policy for a while, that seems to have come unstuck a bit. They'll have to rethink that. The other thing they'll definitely be rethinking is this implicit security deal. If they host the enormous American base, it's never spelt out, but the unspoken quid pro quo is you protect us. There will definitely be conversations, late at night as people drink tea and chew over these things about, maybe we should begin to diversify. Maybe we should do what the UAE have done. Maybe we should be talking to the Chinese and the Russians more. Really dramatic events into completely different parts of the world, both of which, in my view, speak to the consequences of American diplomatic retreat.
And to me, the eroding of international law, which has become a sort of something that is only there on paper and is no longer observed by the strong men. But yeah, I think if you can act unilaterally and just probe and test and do things that, I mean, Israel hasn't even bothered to try and justify what it's done under international law, because under international law, you cannot strike a sovereign state that you're not at war with unless it's under self-defense.
Justifying it under international law. I didn't need them, but are you sure they haven't even tried?
Other people are trying.
Right.
They haven't tried.
Okay.
And there is no justification. They're not at war. It's not self-defense. You can't just bomb a country. So I think that is a dangerous lesson for the world's other strongmen, your Xi's, your Putins, your Kims, your Erdogans. What's to stop those other countries from bombing someone when they don't like who they're hosting? You know, maybe it's a Singh separatist that India wants to get to. Maybe it's a Kurdish separatist that Turkey wants to get to. These are some of the lines that start to become blurry when things like this happen and aren't pushed back against.
I think we're getting into big discussions of precedent, and we could talk about the invasion of Iraq and the war on terror and whether or not international law has ever really existed or has always been to a degree, a voluntary thing. But anyway, maybe it's time for us to talk about the largest arms fair in the world.
Let's. Coming up after the break, you're going to hear our visit to DSEI.
We're speaking to you from the cab of a Finnish-built Patria fighting vehicle, which is parked in the middle of a conference centre in London's Docklands.
We're here at DSEI. It's one of the world's largest arms fairs, the largest arms trade fair in the UK. And we've come here to chat to people about weapons, future of war. Roland, stop pressing all the buttons. Roland's very excited to be in this. What is this?
This is a Patria fighting vehicle. It's produced by a Finnish company. It's already in service, I'm told, by the people who make this in Finland, Latvia and some of the other Nordic countries. It has 6 large wheels. It's a big green vehicle with bulletproof glass. I'm looking at an infrared or thermal imaging camera, I think, of the people right in front of us. It is designed for conventional warfare in the north of Europe. In other words, this is the kind of thing that the Finns, the Balts, and so on are stocking up on for the eventuality of a potential war with Russia. I'm told it's affordable. It says outside that this is an affordable platform. I asked him, he said, well, if you buy one, it's going to be very expensive. If you buy 50, we can get it down to about $1 million a piece, but that's without the trim, right? So he said, even if you want to put on the fairly standard now kind of automatic weapon systems, you're looking at the 50% of the price going on top of that. I was hoping to pick one up for the Telegraph, but it seems not. But that gives you a sense, again, of the incredible numbers that are thrown around in the arms industry.
I've never been to a defence trade fair before, and I'm a bit overwhelmed by how many guns and weapon systems there are here. Somewhere between titillated and disgusted. I mean, these are quite exciting weapons, and a lot of the stuff here is quite gamified. You know, there are shooting games and drone navigation games. And I'm conscious also that this stuff is used in the real world, in real wars. There were protests yesterday outside about the participation of, I think, about 50 Israeli companies. The Israeli government were banned from coming here, but as we say, the Israeli companies are still here, and some of those are state-run, like Rafael and Israel Aerospace Industries. What do you make of that sort of tension, Roland? Have you been to these kind of defence trade fairs before? How do you square it all off?
Not in Britain. I used to go to the Max Air Show in Russia, which is their version of Farnborough. That kind of doubles as an arms fair, and it's very similar to this. It's a conference centre or a big hangar full of these kinds of very corporate stalls with their kind of corporate management speak. People talking about rapid decisions for your defence solutions and things like this. It's all very polished advertising level stuff. Lots of people walking around in suits. There are people in camouflage as well, but it is very sanitized, and there is the discombobulation between the brutal, very thuggish effects of this stuff when it's used on the battlefield is it's impossible not to notice. And I suppose everybody here is aware of that. I mean, you'd have to be pretty oblivious not to have clocked that as you walk around here.
Yeah, I think sanitized is a really good way to put it. I mean, it just comes across as a business trade fair. I've been to lots of trade fairs before, like any other, but this is the business of war. And some of that is defensive and what we would call in the West legitimate, like Ukraine trying to defend itself from Russia. And some of those wars are more contested. One of the countries that the UK exports to the most is Saudi Arabia. And for many years, they were involved in a really brutal war in Yemen. The UK doesn't supply that many arms to Israel, although there are contested elements over the parts of the F-35 supply chain that we do still export to Israeli companies. But Israeli companies, like I said, are given a platform here, and that's very contested. There is a war going on. Over 60,000 people are believed to have been killed. Accusations of genocide being thrown around. It's a tricky space that you find yourself in, and I think it doesn't feel like there's much of that politics here. It feels very much like the politics is outside in the real world, and this feels like a bubble.
I think you're right. As always, the politics are left outside. It's about defence. It's also about business, and all those ethical questions are clearly kind of slightly pushed to the side. And I think the reason we're here, of course, is for a similar reason. We're here to have a look at, how defence, or how those people who run defence industries and defence ministries envision war is about to change in the future. And I mean, the vehicle we're sitting in right now is something of a testament to that. It's an incredibly swish, modern thing that is designed to respond to one of the current threats faced in Europe. For those interested, it's an automatic transition. I'm not sure how many gears there are, but I did manage to just put on the hazard lights. It's quite it looks deceptively easy to use. I hope there's no fuel in the tank, because I'd quite like to drive this around. So that's why we're here, and we're going to be having some fairly interesting conversations about things like the British Army's new tank, about chemical warfare, and about the lessons of drone warfare from Ukraine. In each of those conversations, you're going to see what the people involved in those projects think about what the future is bringing.
Hello, my name's Major Colin McIntyre. I'm the OC Trials for Challenger 3.
So we're looking at a Challenger 3. It's an absolutely enormous, hulking... This one's painted in a kind of olive green. And from the outside, it looks like... Familiar from the Challenger, or the Challenger 2, or I'd say other kind of Western MBTs. It has that sloping front armour, that absolutely enormous barrel, and that big slope-fronted turret that we're used to seeing from battlefields around the world. But I'm told that the changes are largely on the inside, would you say? I mean, it's the invisible things to us. The composition of the armour.
The armour has changed considerably. It's future-proof for survivability and enabling any soldier that goes into combat, they are safe, unlike other versions or other tanks that are around.
The Challenger 3 is still prototype, right? The Army doesn't own it.
This is a prototype. This is P3, and it's conducted some trials already, and it's here at DSEI to show off for the first time Challenger 3 to the defence industry and anyone that's interested in defence.
Have you driven one?
No, at this current moment in time, the only people that have been in to drive the tank, because it is a prototype, is RBSL employees. The MOD will not be crewing the tank for a wee while anyway, until the information that we deem necessary to put MOD crews in there, we have got that information to hand.
This is the next generation that follows the Challenger 1 and the Challenger 2. But you're a veteran tank soldier, right? You were just telling us. You know about those tanks and what they do on the battlefield. Tell us a bit about your career and your experience.
I am a bit of a veteran. Fossil could be another word. I'm trained on Chieftain originally, Challenger 1, then Challenger 2, and now I've got an impact as the OC trials for Challenger 3. I was as a gunner on Grand Bay back in 1991, and then I was involved in Telek as a Squadron Sergeant Major in 2003.
Telek was the invasion of Iraq?
The invasion of Iraq, yeah.
Can you tell us about what it was like in combat in a Challenger 2 and what you think needs to change looking at the battlefield today? What has changed in 20 years and what you think that, say, the war in Ukraine has told you about the future of armoured warfare?
Having been a tank soldier at war, I have and had the confidence that it was the best tank there. It had the best survivability with the protection, the firepower we had there. There was nothing that could match us at that time and place. With Challenger 3, we have improved drastically, possibly a quantum leap forward. We've improved the lethality with the L55 smoothbore barrel gun. We've improved the survivability with the armour that's on the tank, and we've improved the mobility with what the changes we've made to Challenger 3 with a new engine in it.
It says it's a 24-hour all-weather tank. Were previous Challengers not? What does that mean?
Well, what that means is, at the moment, with the current Challenger 2 that's in service, the gunner has got both day and night vision with thermal capabilities. The commander has not. And Challenger 2, the commander has only got day and visual and hasn't got thermal. Where Challenger 3, both commander and gunner have got visual and thermal sights, so therefore it's increased the 24-hour capability on the battlefield. I am so passionate about this tank. I mean, I say to my children, they're 38 now and 34, and they say, Dad, you've got a passion about you again, because I'm involved in this. I'm passionate about the tank. I want to deliver to MOD, Royal Armoured Corps troops, the best that we possibly can. I mean, this isn't a job for me. This is like a hobby. It's nice coming into work in the morning.
A real tank man.
A
tanker's tank man. In that case, Cavalry. Sorry, cavalry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your rank site, Scots Dragoon Guards.
Scots Dragoon Guards,
So the tradition that began on horses and is now on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now on this. I'm just wondering. I mean, do you think there is still a place for enormous, expensive main battle tanks on the battlefield, given the prevalence of drones, the prevalence of tank killing? We've seen Challenger 2s destroyed and disabled in Ukraine. They're not invincible, obviously. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Do we need tanks on the battlefield? Absolutely, yes. Of course we do. We need it. The simple answer is yes.
Does that change? That role changes in and how they're employed. That will have to. I'm presuming that will have to change. It's not compared to, say, what you were doing in Telek.
In Telek, yes, the battlefield has changed. Yeah, we've all seen that with the use of drones. I'm not in a position to say, nor will I say, how we will use Challenger 3 on the battlefield, but in my experience, it will change. It needs to change.
But tanks will still be there.
Oh, tanks are prevalent. Tanks are prevalent. Whatever were the battlefields that we've got at the moment with Ukraine or Gaza, tanks have a big and still will have a big part to play, and do play a big part in it. This is in essence to show off the future, what the British Army will bring to the battlefield. We've got Challenger 3, we've got Ajax, and we've got Boxer, and this is the future of the British Army.
What's your favourite tank in history? Any tank, you can pick any tank. If you could trade in your car for a tank, what would you choose?
It depends, right, a bit more depth than that. What do I want to achieve with that tank?
I think you want to have a schoolboyish tickle of excitement that you're actually driving this cool tank that you've always quite liked. Nothing beyond that.
We could look at the Tiger, obviously from the Second World War, German built obviously, and the engineering went into that was monumental, but in comparison with the T-34, and we know which came better there. In this case, quantity beat quality. The best tank, or any tank I would go in, it would have to be, in my own experience, if I had to go to conflict, would be Chieftain, Challenger 1, Challenger 2, and indeed Challenger 3. I would not want to go to war in any other tank.
Not in a Leopard, not in an Abrams?
No.
Very patriotic. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Right, the next one's a judgmental. Only shoot at people with a weapon system. If you shoot anyone without one, you go into prison. You just shot an unarmed man. No. Right, I tell you what, the Telegraph's gone downhill, innit? Everyone read the Mirror.
Oh dear.
My name's Rory Chamberlain, Managing Director UK of Ukrspecsystems.
And can you tell us a bit about Ukrspecsystems, Ukraine's largest drone manufacturer, right?
Yeah, correct. We've been established for over 10 years now, over 2,500 people working hard in Ukraine to deliver game-changing capability. We're excited now about bringing that to the UK, reassuring that supply chain, which is something that we can do in the UK, still supporting Ukraine, supporting UK, supporting NATO.
So manufacturing bases in Ukraine, but you have sites here as well. I know you've just announced a new one in East Anglia.
Yeah, we already have our site a manufacturing site in East Anglia and a training facility deeper into East Anglia as well. That's where we want to be. We want to be able to fly, and East Anglia's got the weather to do it in the UK.
I'm from Cambridge. We love those big open skies.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a bit more about the new announcement, what it is that you've announced in terms of investment here in the UK?
Yeah, so it's a £200 million investment over 5 years, and it's all about technology, infrastructure, and training, upskilling the local community as well. So we're working hard with the colleges to make sure we've got the right apprenticeship schemes in place. These types of things are done in Ukraine as well, so we're kind of mirroring what we've had to do to upskill that workforce, and we're now doing that in the UK as well. So we're excited about bringing that pace of development that has been so successful in Ukraine and bringing it to the UK and speeding up the tempo.
So it's about using lessons learned in Ukraine to try and build up the drone manufacturing industry here in the UK?
Correct, exactly that. Not just bringing great products, but bringing the right mentality.
Have you been getting a lot of support from the government for that? I know it's quite a nascent industry here, but we're hearing a lot of new announcements of companies setting up manufacturing here or starting up here, drone companies.
So we were supported by the Department of Business and Trade. The Inward Investment team did a great job, and we worked with some of the Freeport institutes in the east of Anglia. We've had that kind of support, and it's been really useful. It's definitely difficult for Ukrainian companies to understand how Western defense works, especially at a time when they're laser focused on the war, right? So, that support's really meaningful to us.
And are these sold then to the UK armed forces, or who buys these drones?
We hope they will be. As Ukrspecsystems, our motto is in advance. We're here to be bold, we're here to properly invest, be ready. We'll support Ukraine, and we'll support UK and NATO.
What do you think of the UK Armed Forces' use of drones at the moment? Is it sufficient? Do we have a really long way to go? Are we sort of on the right track?
I think definitely post-SDR we're on the right track. We've seen CGS. Chief of General Staff, as Sir Ollie Walker, has really kind of pushed that deeper understanding of UAVs. They need to be attritable or consumable, which is directly what Ukraine understands. And he spoke the first time, spoke about tech craft, soldiers needing tech craft. So that is something that Ukraine has fully developed. And so I think UK Army is moving in that direction. And I think UK defence as a whole is moving in the right direction.
Can you tell us what we're looking at here? This is one of your prototypes, I guess.
It's not a prototype. So this is in full rate production. It's been in full rate production since 2022. This is the Shark, and it's probably the most famous UAV in Ukraine. Everyone knows the Shark. It's
even got teeth on the front, is that right?
It's got teeth on the front. So its predecessor had a smaller mouth. Now this is the Shark M. This is the new improved version. 7 hours of endurance, fully electric, 3,000 meter ceiling. This provides that kind of ISR in the deep contested environment. So it's about being survivable. It spots the targets, and the HIMARS strikes do the rest.
And it's on like a launcher, like a catapult system?
The catapult launcher is probably how most of these kind of systems are launched, just because it's tactical, it's reliable, and it can be dealt with by the forces that use them. I know some people use canister launch, but it's a bit more complex technically, and they have reliability issues, whereas when you see a basic launcher and it's a bungee, you can operate it, you can work it in all conditions. And really, when you've got your soldiers forward, they need to be able to quickly deploy. They need to be able to set that up, push the button, know it's going to launch reliably, and then move to cover and be safe. That's what we're all about.
What is that camera? What's that feeding back to?
So it feeds back to our system. So we've designed our own software, which is called Terminal. And we have AI targeting enabled. So every image that we've captured on the battlefield, we've used to train our AI model. Data's king, and we've got the data. So we trained our AI model on that. So it provides the AI targeting. There are operators safe, watching what the AI wants to target, and it prioritizes the order of the targets that it sees. It produces the reports that get sent to the battlefield management systems that decide, how it's going to be taken off the battlefield, shall we say.
You've put RAF roundels on that. What is that all about?
It's an homage. It's an homage to the UK. So we're celebrating the fact that we have invested in the UK. We recognise the Spitfire as an icon of the UK, and the Shark is an icon of Ukraine. So we're here to celebrate that. Hey, if it sticks, I'm okay with it as well, because it looks cool.
An explosion just occurred on a picture of a self-propelled artillery piece.
Mini Shark was used.
So this is real footage.
This is real footage.
Ukraine.
This is from our Mini Shark, real footage. The strike asset is classified. We don't talk about that. The range you can see, and this is the actual thing being.
So you've shown us a video of a real 152mm self-propelled howitzer being destroyed by Ukrainian forces using one of your Mini Shark recons, although you're not telling us what was used to blow it up.
Correct. Correct.
You guys have been operating for 10 years. How has your work changed since the full-scale Russian invasion? You must have learned a lot, iterated a lot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the UK, you hear a lot of people talk about spiral development. Is that a thing that you come across? A lot of the kind of new contracts say, we want development spirals. In Ukraine, there aren't really development spirals. It's a development race. It never stops. As much as Shark's an airframe, it's constantly evolving. As the EW threat changes, the software is constantly changing. Electronic warfare. We have 24/7 support to the front line. So if they need something, if they see a different kind of jamming, we're made aware straight away. We get the logs. We can counter it straight away. We can get that. We don't need the systems back. Everything is updated at the point, at the front line. So that's really what we do. And I think that's what we've learned, is that products are great, but actually the real product is how you support it, because the environment's constantly changing.
Can you almost feel yourself in competition with the Russian developers on the other side, who are presumably doing the same thing?
The best way to describe it is it's a cat and mouse race. It's constantly changing, and that's why our motto is in advance. We need to get ahead of what we think they're potentially doing, and we're trying to constantly game that and get ahead and find the new ways to stay relevant and work and do the job we're supposed to do, which is defeat the enemy. It never stops. Yes, we think we've got the best platform. I've seen some of the other images like you've seen there of things we've hit and how able we've been to be up there for so long, be unseen, again fully electric, so low acoustic signature, very high ceiling, so up at 3,000 meters, unable to hit it with standard kind of air defense systems. You need a very sophisticated, expensive system to take down what is quite a cheap system in itself. So the cost benefit is another thing that really drives our success.
Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former army officer, military analyst and occasional Telegraph columnist.
So here outside Avon stand, why is this interesting?
Well, Avon are a very old British company, are the leading manufacturer of respirators on the planet. In fact, provide the British military with all their kit, the American military, all NATO countries, and very significantly also now the Ukraine Armed Forces. And these British gas masks are now all over the front line. And as people may be aware, may not be aware, the Russians have been using industrial amounts of chemical weapons on the front line over the last sort of 18 months, and really having a profound effect, mainly because the Ukrainians had no protection. But luckily the British government realised eventually that they had a company that is the leading manufacturer, and now I understand the Ukrainians have over 100,000 of some of the respirators that you see here, and that is completely nullifying the Russian use of chemical weapons, and hopefully that means that the Russians will stop using them.
I've never been to an arms trade fair before, and there's a sort of gamified aspect to a lot of the stands here, but all of this stuff is used in real wars on battlefields to kill real people. I'm not quite sure what to make of it all. How do you sort of square off some of those ethics?
I mean, you're right, and certainly the piece I've written in the paper today after the Polish incident with drones is most of the kit here, most of the things that people report on are the tanks that we've got on the right here, Ajax, the new armoured vehicle for the British Army, fighter jets that you'll see around the place, and air defence, and of course drones. And they are ostensibly offensive weapons. However, the key element on the battlefield is also defence. This is the biggest defence show in the world, but ostensibly I think it is mainly the West and NATO showing what technology they have. And if all the technology here was available to the Ukrainians at the moment, I expect they'd be in a very different position than they are when we sort of look at all the protesters outside. The sad reality that there is war in Europe at the moment, and we know that President Putin exploits weakness ruthlessly and only respects strength. And I think hopefully what is demonstrated by this show at Excel DSEI is actually the West and NATO and European countries do have military strength. And if Putin could see it and realise it, everything else that's been tried hasn't worked. If we show military strength to Putin, there is a chance that that is more likely to bring him to the peace negotiation table than sanctions or cutting off his oil.
So this apparently is the Ajax. Is it an infantry fighting vehicle? Is that what it's technically called?
Yeah, infantry fighting vehicle, technically called, but it also has a lot of other roles of providing gunner surveillance in here, reconnaissance. It's going to be the new recce vehicle, light reconnaissance for the armoured corps. But ostensibly, it's an infantry fighting vehicle.
It's the replacement to the old Warrior, and has been, anybody who's been even following the news down to a defence nerd will know that it's had an incredibly troubled genesis. Cost overruns, delays, controversies about the suspension, I think.
It's had big issues with noise and vibration. I would say, with my sort of military hat on rather than my journalistic hat on, it has been rather easy meat for people to get a hold of. When you're developing new pieces of kit, it's very complex and you expect to have issues. I mean, this issue is significant. We understand it's now been sorted, and actually the people I've spoken to who use it think it's a fantastic bit of kit.
It's absolutely enormous. Well, we can't call this a tank because it is an infantry fighting vehicle, but to all extents and purposes, I mean, this is bigger than your standard Russian-Ukrainian T-72, but considerably. It's really, really tall. I mean, it's actually as tall as me. You couldn't really clamber up the side of this. You might get on the front. It's probably about, I'm looking at the top of the thing on that turret, I mean, it's probably about 12 feet off the ground. It's not going to be easy to hide. It's wide and black, this one. This one is painted black. It's a Gothic fighting vehicle.
A T-72's armour is pretty thin, and on the current battlefield you see so many T-72s with the tanks, the turrets blown off because they just don't have the protection. Russian designers and developers were not big on protection. As we've seen, Putin has little regards for casualties, whereas this is very well protected, which creates some of its bulk. But yeah, it's a heavy beast. I think it's 35 tons, which is slightly less than a T-72, but again, this is an infantry fighting vehicle, and as a tanky, I'd say absolutely not a tank, and we could spend hours discussing what is a tank and what isn't, but basically I think you need a gun of at least 120 millimetres in calibre to call it a tank. All the people I know who have operated this think it's a great piece of kit.
That's all for this week's Battle Lines. We'll be back on Monday with our usual Start the Week episode. Until then, that was Battle Lines. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Battle Lines is an original podcast from The Telegraph, created by David Knowles and hosted by me, Roland Oliphant, and Venetia Rainey. If you appreciated this podcast, please consider following Battle Lines on your preferred podcast app. And if you have a moment, leave a review, as it helps others to find the show. To stay on top of all our news, subscribe to The Telegraph, sign up to our Dispatches newsletter, or listen to our sister podcast, Ukraine the Latest. You can also get in touch directly by emailing battlelines@telegraph.co.uk or contact us on X. You can find our handles in the show notes. The producer is Peter Shevlin, and the executive producer is Louisa Wells.